And we're speaking with Christopher North of NotReadyRacing.com. Christopher is a kart racer, and he has a kart racing team called Not Ready Racing. You can see it at NotReadyRacing.com. You can go visit his website there. And he's basically been doing this for a little over a decade. We're going to find out a little bit more about what Chris is doing, how he got started, and really how he's using radios, incorporating radios with his racing team. Chris, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here. Really, really appreciate it. For starters, you're based in Rhode Island, right?
Yes. Yeah, based out of Rhode Island.
Okay. Your whole team is from Rhode Island, or they're from various other places?
So most of our team is from Rhode Island. We have one member who's from right on the border with Connecticut and Rhode Island, so all very close.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a pretty small state as it is. Tell me a little bit about how you got started in kart racing or racing in general. I know you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, so after I'd come back from the service, I'd always had an interest in the automobiles, cars, things of that nature. And the more car events I went to, the more I found out people started to do auto racing, different forms of rallycross, autocross, things of that nature. And I'd done that for probably about 2 or 3 years and made a bunch of connections through that as well. And then as I progressed, we started to do more kart racing, indoor and outdoor kart racing on the weekends. And as you might imagine, auto racing is very expensive.
Yeah.
Kart racing's a fraction of the price. So I said auto racing is a great time. I still, hop in a car every once in a while, but kart racing has been our go-to for the better part of the last 8 or 9 years.
So you've done some, Formula One style racing and things like that, or Indy style racing or anything like that?
Yes, we've done some open wheel racing. We've gone to a couple of different training schools and things of that nature. There's a school up here held at Lime Rock, which is a racetrack in Connecticut. Skip Barber is the one who puts that school on. And they have a couple different racing programs, different schools. They have open wheel. They have more of the closed wheel, stock car racing for people who are going to progress through that. I've always liked the open wheel racing a little more. I've made a couple of connections through that, along with having some connections previous to the racing, and they've come along for the ride as well.
Sounds like you've been pretty heavy into this for quite a while. Now, did you start kart racing when you were a kid or something? Because I know that a lot of kart racers that are doing it now kind of started off when they were, 7 or 8, 9 years old and that sort of thing, and kind of got the bug sort of bit them then, and then they went on to bigger. I know a lot of NASCAR drivers have kind of done that.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the majority. A lot of people start racing when they're very young. I actually didn't. I was a snowboarder. I like being outdoors more so than anything when I was younger. And I didn't really get the bug until probably about a decade or so now ago, when I was early 20s. I was always competitive as a kid. Always like different competitions, whether it was snowboarding and just having little competitions and stuff. Played sports when I was younger, did baseball and stuff, but the margins in racing are so close that it really is a competitor's field. So,
is there a lot of big money in kart racing, or is it just kind of it's something you sort of do on the side?
For us, it's something we enjoy doing on the side. There's the old adage of the quickest way to make $1 million in racing is start off with 2 million, because it's unless you're really, really good and you're on a high level performance team, no matter the racing group that you're part of, it's very difficult to make money from it. A lot of times you can make it close to break even, but that's about the best the people in the grassroots level are going to do.
So most people, when they're doing this, they don't really quit their day job or anything, at least not right away.
No, we all work different jobs. I have a couple of friends up here who, work as, manufacturing. They, I myself, I work at the College of Rhode Island. So we all work different jobs, and, on the weekends we do our kart races.
I know that kart racing is a sport. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to, go-karting on Saturday nights, that sort of thing. And I figured it was something that could be a sport, but I had no idea that it was something that was fairly well established already. So I was a little surprised when I looked around and I said, hey, wow, this is really a thing. How big of a sport is kart racing?
I'd say it's really big. It's kind of forgotten about in a lot of ways, but I was telling someone last night how if you look at a lot of people across the racing industry, I said they either started off in small circle track racing or they started off in karts. And a lot of people say, oh, well, karts, there's a lot of, younger people. And I would say it's probably a good 50 to 60% are about my age. I'm 31. And a lot of them are between my age and 40. There's a large demographic like that.
This is really a growing sport, right? It's just
yeah, of course. I
bigger?
mean, the biggest thing, I was having a conversation with someone last night about it, and I was saying that karting specifically, if you look at the basics of it, I said it is quintessentially the best, most competitive form of racing there is. The lightest possible, machine you could be operating. And, rear wheel drive, you could either do a manual shifter kart or you could do a single gear where it's just gas and brake. So yeah, they're definitely getting bigger and bigger as the years goes on.
And when we're talking about kart racing as a sport, I mean, unlike stock car or Formula One racing, when we're talking about a sport that can be held indoors or outdoors, not just an outdoor thing. So aside from the obvious differences in venue, what are the advantages and disadvantages of racing in these two environments?
So indoor, you're going to get more electric vehicles. They have a lot. I think the company that's prominent in that market is called Rimo, R-I-M-O. They're based out of Germany. A lot of the karting that I've seen, at least in New England, has been by that company. Awesome performance karts. Obviously, you get all the benefits of electric for the environment based, so you can run them indoors without having to worry about ventilation and such. And then also you get the performance of the electric, vehicle per se, where you get, those added benefits of instant torque and such. And then outdoor is, I would say, almost two different things. Indoor, you're going to have, at least the ones that I've been to for tracks, the indoor ones are very, very close, very, they don't have a lot of room to really let the karts run up to full speed compared to the outdoor.
I've karted indoors, and it's a little bit more, little more closed in.
Yeah, and then the outdoor ones are allowed to, push the karts a little faster. The tracks are usually a lot wider as well with the outdoor ones, so you have more room to, perform your or perfect your racing craft as well. Figure out a good racing line when it comes to that.
Well, what's the fastest speed of a go-kart, by the way? I mean, how fast can you really get them to go?
So the other day I was having a conversation with someone looking to get some new karts for next year. And, right now we're running a two-stroke engine, and we're possibly looking into getting a larger four-stroke. On the low end, if you went, lowest of the lowest go-kart, you're probably looking at 45 to 50 miles an hour.
How many?
About 45 to 50.
Really, that much? Because, the go-kart tracks that I went to and that I paid money for, they wouldn't go much faster than about 20 miles an hour most.
Right. And that's what a lot of people think of when we say, oh, we do kart racing and stuff. They say, oh, like these style? Like, oh, no, these are, and that's usually on the low end. On the upper echelon of karts, shifter karts, you're probably looking at about north of 100, probably 105, 110.
Wow. So these have gearboxes and everything where you're shifting?
Yeah, some of the upgraded ones, the higher echelon of karts, you'll look into shifter karts where they'll actually have gears and a transmission to go through those.
Wow, I didn't realize he went quite that fast. Like I said, I'm just used to putzing around on a Saturday night and pay my $3 and sit down for 5 minutes until they call you in or something. But so this is something that's completely different from that. It takes this up to a whole nother level. Is it a fairly safe sport?
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing that you'll notice if you go to some tracks that are a little bit more like what you were describing, where it's a front Friday or Saturday night, they'll have added safety measures put on because of the liability and insurance that they carry, compared to if you're running a racing series. Theirs will be a little bit different. Most of the competitive racing karts don't use seatbelts, which you're going to want.
Really?
No, they don't, which is surprising to people. You'd think they'd have seatbelts, but
yeah, if you're going 50, 60 miles an hour or better, I would think that would be a requirement.
So when they're in the FIA is the one who runs essentially all racing, across the globe. But they essentially would rather you, if the kart starts to maneuver in a way or gets unsafe, they'd rather you bail out essentially of the kart, almost like a motorcycle, and let the kart, go down the track. Yeah.
So you're jump out of it or something?
If it's still flat, you wouldn't hop out of the kart, you'd stay in it. But if the kart does flip over, they'd want you to be out of the kart, almost similar to a motorcycle would be, rather than trying to keep you in it.
I see. And you guys are wearing helmets and things like that. You wear I wouldn't say it's a fire suit per se, but it's like a full suit, so you've got some protection there, right?
So that's another large difference between karting and stock car racing, is that stock car racing uses the flame retardant suits. Because like I mentioned, if you're in the car and something catches fire, they want you to have that protection, compared to a kart where they don't allow the Nomex, which is the fire-resistant material. They don't allow Nomex at all. They have skid-resistant, so it's almost like a motorcycle jacket, or it's abrasion-resistant. So that way if something happens and you get tossed out of the kart, you're able to slide with minimal effect, but none of the fire-resistant material.
I really would like to touch a little bit on your team. Now, you're not racing alone. You've got a whole team of people here. Tell me a little about your team and how you got them all together.
So like I mentioned, our team initially started with myself and then another friend of mine who's also named Chris. We started doing rally together. He was my co-driver, and we just had a really good relationship with that. And as we progressed away from auto racing and towards kart racing, we stuck together, and obviously we've ended up here with racing as two different karts, but on the same team, which naturally would bring some internal competition is there as well. And then the other two members who just joined a few months ago, one comes from a dirt bike racing background, and he's done very well for his racing series. So he knows a lot. He brought a lot to us, the endurance style. So he helped us kind of map out what it would take to do a 2-hour, 3-hour race.
Now, would that be Mitch or would it be Jackson?
Jackson.
Okay.
Racing. And then Mitchell, who is Chris Brown's brother, does the sim racing, and he's done very well. He does more the stock car style sim racing. But again, it's to us, a lot of the racing really boils down to a lot of the fundamentals. So we're glad to bring him on board as well.
So we've got a whole racing team here together. They get that everybody's kind of at every race, or do you have everybody? Everybody doing the same job at every race, I should say, or do some of you guys switch off driving, or who? How do you work that out?
So usually we like to have myself and Chris are our two primary drivers for as many events as we can attend, both logistically and financially. And then Jackson is our added driver. He usually will attend if we're doing an endurance race, to where we'll rotate through drivers. And then Mitchell is our communications guy. So he'll run he'll keep track of all our race times. He'll keep track of what's going on in the pits. If we have media coverage, he'll coordinate with them to make sure we're getting certain things covered. So that way myself and the other drivers can concentrate on the race.
So he's kind of like your crew chief then?
Yes. Yeah, he would be our crew chief. So he's a very good racer. And as we started to approach the idea of doing this on a larger scale, he tipped his hat out and said, you know what, I'll be the crew chief. And he's he's very good at it. We appreciate him doing that.
Hey, there are a lot of crew chiefs out there in these racing venues that started off as big racers, and that's how they earned their their stripes at being a good crew chief, because they have that experience and they know what it's like in the car and what's needed, what's required, but what the limitations are, that sort of thing. So it requires a certain mindset to do that. Let's talk about the radio. Of course, we're going to talk about the radios, but because this is the Two-Way Radio Show.
Right.
But having said that, we all know that two-way radios are used extensively in NASCAR and other racing organizations. So it's not surprising to find that they would also be a tool for communications in kart racing as well. But just how important are they to a kart team? Just how are they used, and just how critical they are to the communications?
Very. I have I have your website link up on our website, and I wrote a little biography about that as well. And in the biography, I mentioned that.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And I mentioned that without communication, whether it's hand signals or audio visual, it's very difficult to win a race, even if you're the fastest guy out there. So, starting off, we did use pit signs. We used hand signals to try and coordinate with the drivers. But there is a lot of, as you progress up into the more competitive stages in racing, there is a lot of information that can't be passed through hand signals or a sign. What am I running for a lap time? How quick is the guy behind me? Should I let him pass? Should I race him and not let him pass? That's very difficult to wave somebody down and tell them that. So as we progressed through, we started to look at using radios, and we looked at the wide variety that there are, both wired connections, wireless radios, and for the last year or so, we tried to stick with something simple to use, and that way we can use that as a benchmark of what we know we need and what we don't need in those radios, and if we need to progress up through, then we can go from there.
Well, I can imagine that it would be especially important, as far as hand signals are concerned, that would be kind of an issue if you're doing some sort of, if you're on some sort of long and winding track and you don't have spotters everywhere, especially if there's an emergency or something, I can imagine that's going to be probably something you can't really do sometimes.
Right. I mean, they do have at the larger tracks, at the outdoor tracks, they do have spotters for the race organization itself. So if something does happen, safety-wise, they're able to flag somebody down and have the driver navigate to the side of the track. But in terms of us, like I mentioned, the distance itself was something where we wanted to make sure we had a radio to cover that distance. So usually from where the pit lane is to the furthest part of the track, usually is well under a half a mile, because usually you're going back and forth in front of the pit lane, not really going down away from it. So the distance is always well within a reach of a handheld radio.
Is this usually on flat terrain or any hilly terrain or anything where there might be some other obstructions getting in the way on the track, like trees and things like that?
On a couple of tracks, we do have some obstacles, nothing that's, I would say, detrimental to the use of the radio. There are a couple living up in New England, as I'm sure you guys have down south. We have a lot of hilly areas racing up in the mountains. But you might lose a visual line of sight for not very long. So if it does become an issue, usually we're able to reconnect those radios in a short time.
Now, I know that you're using some Midland FRS radios right now.
Yes.
I think, what are you using? The T31s, I think it's what they are?
T51s. We have the T5.
The T51s. Okay. Do you find that works pretty well for your team?
Yeah. I mean, initially, I was the one who ordered those. I made a clerical error that the T31s don't have a headset connector. So we had to reorder the T51s, and those have worked great. We might be looking to upgrade to the T71s towards the end of this year, because they have the more sensitive or less sensitive Vox settings. The 50 ones only go up to about a 3 that you can adjust, and the 70 ones, I believe, go up to a 9 or a 12. We were just having a meeting the other day about different races we have for this year, and we were saying that we've noticed the Vox actually works really well on the indoor track because you don't have the noise from the motor.
Noise is a big factor on Vox. We did a couple part series on that in the podcast in the past, and it's Vox. Unless you really know what you're doing with the Vox, it can be. A lot of people get into doing using Vox, and they don't really understand how that works and what the limitations are. Sounds like you got that worked out, though.
It took us a while, but we were able to figure it out. And like I said, the indoor tracks is a lot easier to use Vox. You might get an occasional noise from the tires or a passing kart if you're rubbing and racing. But the outdoor, we tried it, is not a chance to use Vox at all. So for the outdoor races, we just have the additional push to talk connector to use those.
So when we talked about how much coverage you generally need, because they're usually half-mile tracks or less, so it sounds like FRS radio, and of course they're license-free, FRS radios is really a good call on this, because you're pretty much going to get all that coverage, and that for half a mile or less, you're usually pretty good. I know some, a lot of people have gone to GMRS radios. Of course, that needs a license, but you get more power out of that. And I think, for what you're doing, I think going like with a business radio or something, that's kind of overkill. But the FRS radio sounds like they're perfect for what you need. And, I've had conversations with people before. We've done episodes of the podcast before where we talk about, well, what are the FRS radios good for you? Good for? What are the FRS radios good for overall? Are they just for families and just for the kids to play with and stuff like that? And I say, no, not at all. There are a lot of local businesses that use FRS radios for serious stuff. Now, there does come with the FRS, there does come a question of discrete communications, because, FRS is pretty much, all those channels are open. So I had a question about how that's worked out. In other words, do you, obviously not everybody's going to be talking on the same channel for all your racing teams that you're racing against. How does that work out? Is everyone, does the venue decide, okay, this team's going to be on this channel, this team is going to be on another channel, that sort of thing, keep everything separate, and so you're all not interfering with each other? How does that work?
So I know that going into a lot of the races, they have had the certain channels set aside for the emergency personnel. So the track officials will use channel 1, EMS will use channel 2. So that way nobody uses those ones specifically. But other than that, we haven't had any issue with keeping our conversations private. We still do have certain keywords that we'll mention to each other just as a safeguard.
Like a little code?
Yeah, I won't divulge them here, but we do have a little code that we use just in case something happens. But I haven't experienced anything to where people are, saying, oh, well, I know that they're using channel 10. Let's hop on there for a couple minutes and see what they're messaging. So,
yeah, I was going to ask, you never know. Some of these racing teams that get very competitive and find out what's going on everywhere else. But for the most part, that's not really an issue then.
No, I haven't experienced anything like that where, I know when we first got into it, I'd asked a couple of other teams like, hey, like what channels are you guys in? It was very, just kind of, everyone kind of keeps their information to themselves and everybody's fair.
Understood. So that's good. It sounds like you guys have it worked out. What about the number of teams that are participating in a race overall? Is it going to vary? 1 to 2 teams, or are you going to have like 15 teams or something? Or how large are these events overall?
I mean, they're fairly large. On any given event or weekend, you could have probably anywhere between 50 to 100 teams.
Really?
But
Wow.
yeah, it's quite a few. But that obviously gets narrowed down by which series you could be racing in.
Mhm.
So, and most of that is based on your racing experience. You'll get slotted into a certain category based on racing experience, and then also your kart's performance as well. And that's how that's dictated.
Now, you just had an event about a month ago, and you got another one coming up here shortly?
Yeah, coming up, I believe this upcoming weekend, June 3rd, we'll be headed out to Tandsworth, New Hampshire. So it should be a pretty good time. And, like I mentioned, we were mentioning before about the FRS radios. That was our biggest selling point was, we could go out and spend a lot of money on something that we don't need, but the FRS radios work perfectly for us.
Great. Once again, thanks a lot for being on the show, Chris. I really appreciate it. Wish you all the best of luck. And we'll be seeing you on the track, I guess.